The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine gardens of Kensington Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood by her bedroom window, watching the groundskeepers tend to the rosebushes below. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who had carried the weight of royal duties with grace for over a decade, but, today, something felt different. The subtle tension in her shoulders and the way she unconsciously placed her hand over her stomach hinted at concerns that went beyond the usual pressures of royal life. The past few months had been challenging in ways that the public could never fully understand. While photographers captured her radiant smile at charity events and state functions, behind closed doors, Catherine had been dealing with health issues that she had kept carefully hidden from the world. The fatigue that seemed to settle deeper into her bones each day, the dizzy spells that came without warning, and the persistent headaches that no amount of rest seemed to cure had become her constant companions. William had noticed the changes first, his observant nature picking up on the subtle shifts in his wife's demeanor long before she was ready to acknowledge them herself. He saw how she lingered a moment longer before rising from chairs, how she gripped the banister more tightly when climbing stairs, and how her usually boundless energy seemed to ebb away like the tide. Their conversations had grown quieter, more intimate, filled with unspoken concerns that neither wanted to voice aloud. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the royal physician who had been discreetly monitoring Catherine's condition, had insisted on more comprehensive tests after the princess experienced a particularly severe episode during a private family dinner. The incident had been brief but alarming enough to send William into protective mode, his instincts as a husband overriding his training as a future king. The sight of Catherine gripping the dining table for support, her face pale as moonlight, had shaken him to his core. The medical appointments had been scheduled with the utmost secrecy, conducted in private wings of hospitals during off hours to avoid any possibility of media attention. Catherine had insisted on maintaining her public schedule throughout the testing process, her determination to fulfill her royal obligations unwavering even as her body seemed to be betraying her. She had attended the opening of a children's hospital just 2 days after a particularly invasive procedure, her smile never wavering as she cut ribbons and posed for photographs. The results of the tests had arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered personally by Dr. Mitchell to ensure complete confidentiality. Catherine and William sat together in their private sitting room, hands intertwined, as the physician explained the findings in careful, measured tones. The diagnosis was not life-threatening, but it was serious enough to require significant changes to Catherine's lifestyle and royal duties. The condition was manageable, Dr. Mitchell assured them, but it would require ongoing treatment and, most importantly, reduced stress levels. The implications of the diagnosis extended far beyond Catherine's personal health. As a senior working member of the royal family, her calendar was booked solid for months in advance. Patronages depended on her presence, charities counted on her support, and the monarchy itself relied on her steady, reassuring presence at official functions. The thought of stepping back, even temporarily, felt like abandoning not just her duties but her very identity as the Princess of Wales. William watched his wife process the information, seeing the wheels turning behind her composed exterior. He knew she was already calculating how to minimize the impact on their children, how to maintain stability for George, Charlotte, and Louis while navigating this unexpected challenge. Her maternal instincts had always been fierce, but now they were coupled with a determination to protect her family from any unnecessary worry or disruption. The conversation with Dr. Mitchell stretched into the afternoon, covering treatment options, timeline expectations, and the delicate balance between Catherine's health needs and her royal responsibilities. The physician emphasized the importance of rest and stress reduction, recommendations that seemed almost impossible given the demands of royal life. Every public appearance, every official engagement, every carefully choreographed moment in the spotlight required enormous energy and emotional stamina. As evening approached, Catherine and William found themselves alone for the first time since receiving the diagnosis. The weight of the information settled between them like an uninvited guest, changing the very air in the room. They had faced challenges before, the intense scrutiny of their courtship, the pressures of their wedding, the difficulties of raising children in the public eye, but this felt different, more personal, more immediately threatening to the life they had so carefully constructed. William's military training had taught him to assess situations quickly and make decisive decisions under pressure, but this was uncharted territory. The woman he loved, the mother of his children, the future queen consort, was facing a health challenge that could fundamentally alter their family's trajectory. His protective instincts warred with his understanding of royal protocol, creating an internal tension that he struggled to resolve. Catherine, ever the practical one, began mentally reorganizing their lives to accommodate this new reality. She thought about which engagements could be postponed, which patronages might need to be temporarily reassigned, and how to maintain some semblance of normalcy for their children. Her mind worked through contingency plans with the efficiency that had made her such an effective royal, even as her heart grappled with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The palace staff remained unaware of the developments, going about their daily routines with the same dedication and discretion that had served the royal family for generations. The seamless operation of royal life continued around Catherine and William, a well-oiled machine that seemed capable of functioning regardless of the personal dramas playing out behind closed doors. But both knew that this facade could not continue indefinitely. That night, as Catherine prepared for bed, she caught her reflection in the mirror once again. The woman looking back at her appeared the same as always, poised, elegant, every inch a princess. But behind her eyes was a new awareness, an understanding that her life was about to change in ways she could not yet fully comprehend. The certainty that had guided her through more than a decade of royal life had been replaced by questions that had no easy answers. Sleep came fitfully that night, filled with dreams of cancelled engagements and disappointed crowds. Catherine found herself walking through empty halls where her footsteps echoed with unusual loudness, as if the very walls were amplifying her isolation. She dreamed of patronages without their patron, of charities forced to find new champions, of a carefully constructed life beginning to unravel at the seams. William lay awake beside her, his mind racing through possibilities and scenarios. He thought about his father's approach to duty versus personal needs, his grandmother's unwavering commitment to service, and the weight of decisions that would affect not just his immediate family but the institution of monarchy itself. The balance between protecting Catherine and maintaining their public responsibilities seemed increasingly impossible to achieve. The dawn brought new challenges and difficult conversations that could no longer be avoided. The time for secrecy and private consultation was drawing to a close, and decisions would need to be made that would ripple through the royal family and beyond. Catherine's health had become more than a personal matter, it was now a constitutional consideration that would require the most delicate handling. As the first light of morning crept across their bedroom, both Catherine and William knew that their lives had reached a turning point. The comfortable routine of royal duty and family life that had sustained them for so many years was about to be tested in ways they had never imagined. The strength of their marriage, the resilience of their family, and their commitment to service would all be examined under the harsh light of public scrutiny and personal challenge. The palace would soon need to be informed, and with that notification would come the beginning of a process that would ultimately lead to public announcements and media speculation. But, for now, in the quiet sanctuary of their private rooms, Catherine and William held on to these final moments of privacy, knowing that once the wheels of royal protocol began turning, their personal crisis would become a matter of public interest and constitutional significance. The breakfast table that morning carried an unusual tension as Catherine sat across from William, both of them picking at their food while their minds wrestled with the magnitude of what lay ahead. The children's laughter echoed from the nursery upstairs, a bittersweet reminder of the normalcy they were fighting to preserve. George's excited chatter about his upcoming school project and Charlotte's animated description of her ballet class seemed to come from another world entirely, one where health scares and royal duties didn't collide with such devastating force. William had spent most of the previous night researching Catherine's condition, reading medical journals and consulting with specialists around the world. His methodical approach to problems had always been one of his strengths, but this situation felt frustratingly beyond his control. No amount of research could change the fundamental reality they now faced, and his usual ability to find solutions seemed inadequate against the complexity of balancing personal health with public duty. Catherine had made a decision during the sleepless hours before dawn. She would not allow fear to dictate her choices, nor would she permit her condition to be used as an excuse for abandoning the responsibility she had sworn to uphold. Her father-in-law, King Charles, had continued his duties even while dealing with his own health challenges, and she drew inspiration from his resilience and determination. The monarchy had survived for over 1,000 years by adapting to circumstances while maintaining its core purpose, and she was determined to be part of that continuity. The morning brought the first of what would be many difficult conversations. Sir Clive Alderton, the King's private secretary, arrived at Kensington Palace at precisely 9 o'clock, his usual punctuality carrying extra weight given the sensitive nature of the discussion ahead. Catherine and William received him in the formal drawing room, a choice that underscored the official nature of what was about to unfold. The informal breakfast table conversations of their private life were about to give way to the structured deliberations of constitutional monarchy. Sir Clive listened with the careful attention that had made him invaluable to the royal family, taking notes in his distinctive shorthand while asking probing questions about timelines, treatment options, and the potential impact on Catherine's official schedule. His years of experience had taught him to think several moves ahead, considering not just the immediate implications but the long-term consequences for the institution as a whole. The conversation was clinical in its precision, yet underneath lay a genuine concern for Catherine's well-being that spoke to the personal relationships that existed within the formal structure of royal service. The discussion revealed the intricate web of obligations that surrounded Catherine's role as Princess of Wales. Her patronages alone numbered in the dozens, each representing causes close to her heart and organizations that depended on her support. The mental health initiatives she had championed, the early childhood development programs she had personally developed, and the conservation efforts she had promoted would all need careful attention to ensure continuity of mission while accommodating her health needs. Catherine found herself caught between competing instincts as the conversation progressed. Her desire to minimize disruption warred with her body's undeniable need for rest and reduced stress. Dr. Mitchell's warnings about the consequences of ignoring her condition echoed in her mind, while her conscience reminded her of the promises she had made to various organizations and causes. The weight of disappointing people who had come to depend on her support felt almost as heavy as the physical symptoms she was experiencing. William's protective instincts manifested in his increasing involvement in the planning process. He began questioning every engagement on Catherine's calendar, evaluating each commitment for its necessity and potential stress level. His transformation from supportive husband to fierce advocate was gradual but unmistakable, and Catherine recognized the same determination in his voice that she had heard when he protected their children from unwanted media attention. The afternoon brought a visit from Catherine's own private secretary, who arrived armed with scheduling conflicts and urgent decisions that could no longer be postponed. The Princess of Wales calendar had been a masterwork of coordination, balancing royal duties, family time, and personal interests in a delicate dance that required constant adjustment. Now, that careful balance was about to be completely disrupted, and the ripple effects would touch hundreds of people across the United Kingdom and beyond. As they reviewed upcoming engagements, Catherine felt a profound sadness at the thought of cancelling events she had been genuinely excited to attend. A visit to a primary school where children had been preparing for weeks, a charity gala where she was to be the guest of honor, a conservation summit where her presence would highlight crucial environmental issues. Each cancellation would disappoint not just her but countless others who had invested time and energy in preparing for her participation. The conversation turned to the question of public disclosure, a topic fraught with complications and competing considerations. The royal family's approach to health matters had evolved significantly over the generations, from the absolute secrecy of earlier eras to a more transparent but still carefully managed approach. Catherine's situation would require a delicate balance between honesty and privacy, providing enough information to explain necessary changes while protecting her medical details from public scrutiny. William's experience with media management proved invaluable as they discussed various approaches to public communication. He understood better than most how quickly speculation could spiral out of control, and how important it was to get ahead of rumors before they took on a life of their own. The timing of any announcement would be crucial, requiring coordination with multiple palace departments and consideration of other royal events that might be overshadowed or complicated by the news. The legal and constitutional implications of Catherine's health situation added another layer of complexity to their planning. While her role as Princess of Wales was not governed by the same strict protocols as direct succession to the throne, her position as future queen consort carried significant responsibilities that could not be easily transferred or temporarily suspended. The constitutional experts would need to be consulted, and precedents from previous generations would need to be carefully examined. Late in the day, Catherine insisted on keeping a long-standing commitment to video call with one of her patronages, a children's mental health charity that was launching a new initiative. Despite the stress of the day's revelations and planning sessions, she felt strongly about maintaining this connection, recognizing that her support meant more to the organization than her own convenience. The call lasted nearly an hour, and, watching Catherine's animated discussion of therapy techniques and support programs, William was reminded of why her royal role meant so much to her personally. The evening brought the family back together around the dinner table, where Catherine and William worked to maintain the normal rhythms of family life even as their world was shifting around them. George's questions about an upcoming school trip, Charlotte's excitement about a friend's birthday party, and Louis's determination to master riding his bicycle without training wheels provided a welcome respite from the weight of royal planning and medical concerns. But, even in these moments of domestic normalcy, Catherine found her mind wandering to the challenges ahead. How would she explain any changes to the children without frightening them? How could she maintain her role as their primary parent while dealing with her health condition? The questions seemed to multiply with each passing hour, creating a mental burden that was almost as exhausting as her physical symptoms. That night, Catherine and William took a long walk through the private gardens of Kensington Palace, a tradition they had maintained throughout their marriage whenever they needed to process difficult decisions. The familiar paths and seasonal plantings provided a sense of continuity and peace that helped them think more clearly about the choices ahead. The conversation that night was different from their usual walks, marked by longer silences and more careful consideration of each word. They talked about their children's futures, about the kind of monarchy they wanted to help build, and about the balance between personal sacrifice and public service. Catherine spoke candidly about her fears, not just about her health, but about letting people down, about being seen as weak or unreliable, about the possibility that stepping back might be interpreted as abandonment of duty rather than responsible self-care. William shared his own struggles with the situation, his frustration at not being able to fix the problem through force of will or royal prerogative. His military background had trained him to believe that most challenges could be overcome through proper planning and determined effort, but Catherine's health condition was teaching him painful lessons about the limits of control and the necessity of accepting circumstances beyond their influence. As they returned to the palace, both understood that the next few days would bring decisions that would reshape their lives in fundamental ways. The comfortable predictability of royal routine was about to give way to uncharted territory, where personal health needs would take precedence over public expectations for perhaps the first time in Catherine's royal career. The thought was both frightening and liberating, representing a choice between different kinds of responsibility and different definitions of duty. The night ended with Catherine writing in her personal diary, a practice she had maintained since her engagement to William. Her words that evening reflected the complexity of her emotions, gratitude for the medical care available to her, concern for the impact on others, determination to handle the situation with grace, and uncertainty about what the future would hold. The woman who had seemed so confident and capable to the outside world was revealing her very human vulnerabilities in the privacy of her own thoughts. The third day dawned with an urgency that had been building since Catherine's diagnosis was confirmed. William had barely slept, his mind churning through the impossible mathematics of royal duty and personal welfare. He found himself standing in his study before sunrise, staring at photographs that lined the walls, images of Catherine at countless royal events, her radiant smile masking what he now knew had been growing discomfort and fatigue. Each picture seemed to tell a different story now, one of quiet courage in the face of mounting physical challenges. The decision that had been crystallizing in William's mind over the past 48 hours felt simultaneously inevitable and revolutionary. Throughout his life, he had been taught that duty came first, that personal considerations must always be secondary to service to the crown and the British people. But, watching Catherine push through her symptoms while maintaining her royal obligations had shown him a different kind of courage, one that required protection rather than exploitation. Catherine entered the study as the morning light began to filter through the tall windows, finding William exactly where she had expected. They had been married long enough for her to recognize the signs when he was working through a major decision, and the set of his shoulders told her that he had reached a conclusion. She poured 2 cups of tea from the service that had been quietly delivered by staff, a small domestic ritual that grounded them both in the midst of upheaval. William's words, when they came, were measured and deliberate. He had been thinking about legacy, he told her, about the kind of monarchy they wanted to help create for their children. The institution had survived by adapting to changing times while holding fast to core principles, and perhaps it was time for another evolution. The rigid separation between public duty and personal well-being that had defined royal service for generations might not be sustainable in an era where mental health and work-life balance were increasingly recognized as essential rather than optional. His proposal was radical in its simplicity. Rather than having Catherine reduce her duties gradually while struggling to maintain her existing commitments, he suggested a complete temporary step back from public life, allowing her to focus entirely on her health and recovery. It would be unprecedented for a senior working royal to take such extended leave except in cases of pregnancy or emergency, but Catherine's situation demanded unprecedented solutions. The implications of such a decision rippled outward like stones thrown into still water. Catherine's patronages would need temporary leadership, her scheduled events would require complete restructuring, and the carefully balanced workload of the working royals would need immediate redistribution. Most significantly, William himself would need to dramatically increase his public role to compensate for Catherine's absence, a prospect that both excited and daunted him. Catherine listened to William's proposal with a mixture of relief and trepidation. The prospect of stepping away from the relentless pace of royal life was undeniably appealing, offering the possibility of genuine rest and recovery that she knew her body desperately needed. But the thought of disappointing the many organizations and individuals who counted on her support weighed heavily on her conscience. She had never been someone who abandoned commitments lightly, and the idea of being seen as unreliable or weak troubled her deeply. The conversation that followed was one of the most honest and vulnerable they had shared in their entire marriage. Catherine spoke openly about her fears that stepping back would be interpreted as weakness, that critics would use her health issues as evidence that she was not suited to royal life. She worried about the message it would send to her children, whether they would see her decision as giving up rather than taking necessary care of herself. William countered each of her concerns with patient logic and unwavering support. He reminded her of the example she would be setting by prioritizing her health, showing their children that self-care was not selfish but necessary. He pointed out that the monarchy's credibility increasingly depended on its ability to adapt to modern understanding of health and wellness, and that Catherine's decision could actually strengthen rather than weaken the institution. As they talked, both began to envision what Catherine's temporary retirement might look like in practical terms. Rather than a complete withdrawal from all royal activities, they discussed a selective approach that would allow her to maintain involvement with her most cherished causes while eliminating the stress of constant public appearances. Virtual engagements, private meetings with charity leaders, and behind-the-scenes work on policy development could continue while public ceremonies and formal events were suspended. The afternoon brought a crucial meeting with King Charles, who had been briefed on Catherine's situation by Sir Clive Alderton but had not yet heard William's proposal directly. The King's study at Buckingham Palace provided a formal setting for what would be an intensely personal conversation, with its portraits of previous monarchs serving as silent witnesses to another moment of royal evolution. Charles listened to William's explanation with the careful attention of a father and the analytical mind of a constitutional monarch. His own experience with balancing personal health issues and royal duties gave him unique insight into the challenges Catherine faced, and his response reflected both compassion and practical wisdom. He spoke about the importance of long-term thinking, of making decisions that would serve the monarchy well not just in the immediate future but for generations to come. The King's support for William's proposal was not immediate but gradual, emerging through careful consideration of alternatives and potential consequences. He asked probing questions about public perception, constitutional implications, and the precedent such a decision might set for future generations. But underneath his careful deliberation was evident concern for Catherine's well-being and recognition that the traditional approach to royal duty might need updating for contemporary realities. The discussion turned to the practical mechanics of implementing such a significant change. Catherine's patronages would need to be carefully managed, with some potentially transferred to other royal family members while others might be temporarily supervised by senior staff. The public announcement would require delicate handling to explain the necessity of the decision without revealing inappropriate medical details or inviting unwanted speculation about Catherine's specific condition. William's own role expansion became a central topic of discussion as the afternoon progressed. His increased visibility would need to be carefully managed to avoid overshadowing his father's reign while still providing adequate coverage for Catherine's suspended duties. The balance between supporting Catherine and maintaining his own distinct royal identity would require constant attention and adjustment. That evening, Catherine and William returned to Kensington Palace with a sense of momentum that had been building throughout the day. The king's conditional approval of their plan had provided the official backing they needed, but, more importantly, it had validated their instinct that protecting Catherine's health was not just personally important but institutionally wise. The monarchy's strength had always come from its ability to evolve while maintaining continuity, and their decision represented another step in that ongoing evolution. The conversation with the children that night was one of the most difficult Catherine had ever faced as a mother. Explaining her need to reduce her royal duties without frightening them about her health required careful word choice and constant reassurance. George, with his growing understanding of royal responsibilities, asked thoughtful questions about what would happen to her charity work. Charlotte, always sensitive to emotional undercurrents, seemed to sense that something significant was changing even if she couldn't articulate her concerns. Louis, still young enough to be primarily concerned with immediate family dynamics, was mostly interested in whether the changes would affect their family time together. His innocent questions about whether Mummy would be home more often brought both laughter and tears, highlighting the silver lining that Catherine and William were both beginning to recognize in their challenging situation. The family spent the evening playing board games and reading stories, activities that had always provided refuge from royal pressures but now carried added significance as symbols of the normal family life Catherine's decision would help protect. The children's laughter and easy affection reminded both parents why the difficult choices ahead were worth making, providing the emotional foundation for the practical decisions that would follow. As Catherine tucked each child into bed that night, she found herself looking at them with fresh eyes, seeing not just her beloved children but the future of the monarchy they were helping to shape. Her decision to prioritize her health was not just about her own well-being but about modeling a different approach to duty and service for the next generation. The lesson that taking care of oneself was a prerequisite for taking care of others seemed more important than ever. The evening ended with Catherine and William working side by side in William's study, drafting lists of priorities and timelines for the transition ahead. The administrative details of stepping back from royal life were surprisingly complex, involving everything from security arrangements to staff reassignments to protocol adjustments. But working through these practical matters together gave them both a sense of control and purpose, transforming an overwhelming situation into a manageable series of tasks. Their collaboration that night reflected a partnership that had deepened through years of shared challenges and mutual support. Catherine's health crisis was revealing new dimensions of their relationship, showing how their individual strengths could combine to handle situations that neither could manage alone. The future felt uncertain, but their ability to face it together provided a foundation of confidence that would sustain them through the difficult times ahead. The fourth morning brought with it a flurry of activity as the palace machinery began to turn in earnest preparation for Catherine's temporary withdrawal from public duties. The private secretary's office became a hub of carefully orchestrated communication, with phone calls to patronages, scheduling adjustments, and delicate conversations with media representatives who had begun to sense that something significant was developing within the royal household. Catherine found herself at the center of a process that felt both intensely personal and entirely removed from her direct control. Teams of advisors, medical professionals, and communications experts were working to translate her private health needs into public policy, a transformation that highlighted the unique challenges of living a life where personal decisions became matters of constitutional significance. The woman who had always prized her privacy was learning to navigate the complex intersection of medical necessity and public interest. The first major challenge came in crafting a statement that would explain Catherine's reduced schedule without revealing inappropriate medical details or inviting harmful speculation. The communications team worked through multiple drafts, each word carefully considered for its potential interpretations and implications. The balance between transparency and privacy required constant adjustment, as too little information might fuel rumors while too much could compromise Catherine's medical confidentiality. William found himself taking an increasingly active role in these discussions, his protective instincts sharpening his focus on every detail of the proposed announcement. He questioned phrases that might be misinterpreted, suggested alternatives that would emphasize Catherine's continued commitment to her causes, and insisted on language that would frame her decision as responsible rather than reactive. His transformation from supportive spouse to fierce advocate was becoming more pronounced with each passing hour. The medical team provided crucial input into the communication strategy, helping to explain the general nature of Catherine's condition without compromising her privacy. Dr. Mitchell worked closely with palace communications specialists to develop language that would satisfy public curiosity while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. The doctor's experience with high-profile patients proved invaluable in navigating the unique challenges of royal medical privacy. Meanwhile, the practical work of redistributing Catherine's royal duties began in earnest. Her patronages were contacted individually, with senior staff explaining the situation and discussing temporary arrangements for continued royal support. Some organizations would be temporarily assigned to other working royals, while others would maintain their connection to Catherine through reduced but continued engagement. The goal was to ensure continuity of mission while acknowledging the reality of her health needs. The conversations with charity leaders revealed the deep personal connections Catherine had formed with many of her causes over the years. Several organization heads expressed not just disappointment about her reduced availability but genuine concern for her well-being, reflecting relationships that had evolved far beyond formal patronage into authentic partnerships. These personal touches reminded Catherine why her royal work mattered so deeply to her and why the decision to step back was so emotionally difficult. Catherine insisted on personally calling the leaders of her most important patronages, feeling that these relationships deserved direct communication rather than messages delivered through intermediaries. Each conversation was emotionally challenging, requiring her to explain her situation while providing reassurance about the future of their working relationship. The warmth and understanding she received from these calls provided unexpected comfort and reinforced her sense that she was making the right decision. The children's routines became a priority focus as the family prepared for the changes ahead. Catherine and William worked with their household staff to ensure that the increased demands on William's time would not significantly disrupt the children's daily lives. School pickups, extracurricular activities, and family traditions would all need careful coordination to maintain stability during a period of significant change. George, Charlotte, and Louis were gradually becoming aware that something important was happening, though the full implications remained beyond their understanding. Catherine made a point of spending extra time with each child individually, answering their questions honestly while providing the reassurance they needed. These conversations became precious moments of connection that reminded her of what truly mattered most in her life. The afternoon brought a significant development when the Archbishop of Canterbury requested a private meeting to discuss the implications of Catherine's situation for her future role as Queen Consort. The conversation touched on complex theological and constitutional questions about duty, service, and the balance between personal well-being and public responsibility. The Archbishop's wisdom and compassionate approach provided valuable perspective on the spiritual dimensions of Catherine's decision. The meeting with church leadership highlighted the broader implications of Catherine's choice for the institution of monarchy itself. Her decision to prioritize health over duty was being closely watched by constitutional experts, historians, and international observers as a potential indicator of how the British royal family was evolving to meet contemporary expectations. The precedent being set would likely influence how future health crises were handled and how the balance between personal and public life was maintained. Security arrangements required significant adjustment as Catherine's reduced public profile would alter her risk assessment and protection needs. The specialist teams responsible for royal security worked to develop new protocols that would accommodate her changed circumstances while maintaining appropriate levels of protection. These behind-the-scenes adjustments reminded everyone involved of the complexity and cost of royal life, even during periods of reduced activity. The evening brought the family together for what had become their most important daily ritual: dinner without devices, formal agenda, or external interruptions. The conversation that night was lighter than it had been in days, focusing on the children's school experiences, weekend plans, and the everyday concerns that formed the backbone of their family life. These moments of normalcy were becoming increasingly precious as the weight of public responsibility pressed down on their private world. Catherine found herself studying her children's faces during dinner, memorizing details that she feared she might miss during the challenging months ahead. George's earnest explanations of his science project, Charlotte's animated storytelling about her friends, and Louis's determined efforts to eat his vegetables independently all took on heightened significance as she contemplated how her reduced energy might affect her ability to be fully present for these everyday moments. William's behavior during family time revealed his own internal struggle with the competing demands of supporting Catherine and maintaining his royal obligations. His phone remained silenced during dinner, but Catherine could see him mentally tracking the messages and calls that were accumulating while he focused on their children. The sacrifice required to balance family needs with royal duty was becoming apparent to both of them in new ways. The bedtime routine that night carried extra emotional weight as Catherine helped each child prepare for sleep. Her usual reading of bedtime stories felt more precious than usual, with every word and shared laugh representing moments of connection that her health condition had made her newly aware could not be taken for granted. The simple act of tucking her children into bed became a meditation on what truly mattered in life. After the children were settled, Catherine and William retreated to their private sitting room for the conversations that had become essential to processing the magnitude of the changes ahead. They talked about fears and hopes, practical concerns and emotional challenges, always returning to their shared commitment to making decisions that would strengthen rather than weaken their family and their service to the monarchy. The evening's most significant development came when William shared his decision to take on additional patronages temporarily, demonstrating his commitment to ensuring that Catherine's reduced schedule would not diminish the royal family's overall contribution to British society. His willingness to increase his own workload to protect her health provided tangible evidence of the partnership that had sustained their marriage through more than a decade of public life. Catherine's gratitude for William's support was mixed with concern about the additional pressure he would face as a result of her situation. She understood better than anyone the demands of royal life and worried about the toll that expanded responsibilities might take on his own health and well-being. Their conversation that night included careful consideration of how to support each other through the challenging period ahead. The day ended with both of them feeling a sense of forward momentum despite the uncertainty that surrounded their future. The practical preparations for Catherine's reduced schedule were proceeding smoothly, the family was adjusting to the idea of change, and the institutional support they needed was materializing. Most importantly, their commitment to facing the challenges together was providing the emotional foundation necessary for navigating uncharted territory. As Catherine prepared for bed that night, she reflected on how much her understanding of duty and service had evolved over the past few days. The rigid adherence to schedule and protocol that had once defined her role was giving way to a more nuanced understanding of how to serve effectively while maintaining personal health. The lesson felt revolutionary in its simplicity. Taking care of herself was not selfish but necessary for sustained service to others. The fifth day dawned with a sense of culmination as the palace prepared for the official announcement that would reshape public understanding of Catherine's royal role. The communications team had worked through the night on final adjustments to the statement, ensuring that every word reflected the careful balance between transparency and privacy that the situation demanded. The morning light streaming through the palace windows seemed to illuminate not just a new day but a new chapter in the evolution of the modern monarchy. Catherine woke earlier than usual, her mind immediately turning to the events that lay ahead. The public announcement would mark the end of the private struggle she had been managing for months and the beginning of a more public conversation about health, duty, and the changing expectations of royal service. The prospect was both liberating and terrifying, offering the possibility of authentic living while exposing her family to unprecedented scrutiny. William found her in the garden, walking among the roses that had become her refuge during difficult moments. The sight of his wife moving slowly among the flowers she loved so much crystallized his understanding of how profoundly her life was about to change. The woman who had graced countless red carpets and official receptions was seeking solace in the simple pleasure of tending to plants, a reminder of the human needs that had been overshadowed by royal obligations for too long. Their conversation that morning was different from the intense planning sessions of previous days, marked by a quieter acceptance of the path they had chosen. Catherine spoke about her relief at no longer having to hide her fatigue behind a perfect smile, while William shared his growing excitement about taking on expanded responsibilities that would allow him to serve in new ways. Both recognized that their decision, while difficult, had opened possibilities that rigid adherence to traditional roles would have prevented. The children joined them in the garden, unaware that this would be one of the last completely private family moments they would enjoy before the announcement changed the public perception of their lives. George's careful examination of a butterfly, Charlotte's delight in picking flowers for her mother, and Louis's determined pursuit of a friendly cat provided a counterpoint to the weighty decisions of recent days. These simple family interactions reminded both parents of what they were ultimately trying to protect and preserve. The final briefing with Palace Communications staff took place in the formal conference room, where the statement that would be released within hours was reviewed one last time. Every phrase had been analyzed for potential misinterpretation, every word chosen for its ability to convey the necessary information without compromising Catherine's privacy or dignity. The document represented months of consideration compressed into a few carefully crafted paragraphs. Catherine insisted on reading the statement herself before its release, wanting to ensure that the public explanation of her situation accurately reflected her own understanding and feelings. The experience of seeing her personal health crisis translated into official language was surreal, highlighting the strange intersection between private human experience and public institutional communication that defined royal life. The statement emphasized Catherine's continued commitment to her patronages and causes while acknowledging the need for a modified approach to her public duties. The language carefully avoided specific medical details while providing enough information to explain the changes in her schedule. Most importantly, it framed her decision as a responsible choice that would ultimately enable better service rather than an abandonment of duty. William's expanded role was outlined in complimentary communications that highlighted his readiness to take on additional responsibilities while maintaining his existing commitments. The presentation emphasized continuity and adaptation rather than crisis management, positioning the changes as a natural evolution of royal service rather than an emergency response to health problems. The afternoon brought a series of private meetings with key stakeholders who needed to be informed before the public announcement. Representatives from Catherine's major patronages received personal briefings about what the changes would mean for their organizations, while government officials were updated on the constitutional implications of the modified royal schedule. Each conversation required careful handling to maintain relationships while managing expectations. The response from Catherine's patronages was overwhelmingly supportive, with many organization leaders expressing admiration for her courage in prioritizing her health while finding ways to continue serving their causes. Several charity heads shared their own experiences with work-life balance and health challenges, creating unexpected moments of connection that reinforced Catherine's sense that she was making the right choice. The children's early bedtime that evening was carefully planned to ensure they would be settled before the announcement was made public. Catherine and William wanted to protect them from the immediate media response while being available to answer any questions that might arise. The family dinner felt more relaxed than it had in days, with both parents able to be fully present knowing that the decision had been made and implementation was underway. As evening approached, the final preparations for the announcement entered their most critical phase. Media contacts were alerted, palace websites were updated with new information, and key stakeholders received advance copies of the statement. The careful choreography of modern royal communication was evident in every detail, from the timing of the release to the selection of accompanying photographs. Catherine spent the hour before the announcement in her private study, writing letters to the patronage leaders with whom she had developed particularly close relationships over the years. These personal notes went beyond the official communications to express her gratitude for their work and her commitment to finding new ways to support their causes despite her reduced public schedule. The act of writing these letters provided her with a sense of closure and continuity that the official processes could not supply. The moment of release arrived with surprising quietness, marked only by the soft chime of notification devices as the statement was distributed to media outlets around the world. Within minutes, the private struggle that had consumed Catherine and William for weeks became public knowledge, subject to analysis, speculation, and commentary from countless strangers. The transformation from private health matter to public interest story was complete. The initial media response was measured and respectful, reflecting both the careful crafting of the palace statement and the genuine affection that much of the public held for Catherine. Editorial writers praised her courage in addressing her health needs honestly, while royal watchers discussed the implications for the future of the monarchy. The conversation was largely supportive, suggesting that the careful preparation and thoughtful communication had achieved their intended effect. Social media responses ranged from messages of support and admiration to detailed discussions of work-life balance and the pressure faced by public figures. Many people shared their own experiences with health challenges and the difficulty of balancing professional responsibilities with personal well-being. Catherine found herself at the center of a broader conversation about modern expectations of duty and service. The family gathered in their private sitting room that evening to watch the news coverage together, a surreal experience that highlighted the strange reality of seeing their personal decisions analyzed and discussed by strangers on television. George asked thoughtful questions about why people were so interested in their family's choices, while Charlotte seemed fascinated by seeing her mother's photograph on the news. As the evening progressed, messages of support began arriving from around the world. Fellow royals, government officials, charity leaders, and ordinary citizens sent notes expressing their admiration for Catherine's decision and their wishes for her recovery. The outpouring of support provided unexpected emotional comfort and reinforced the sense that they had made the right choice. The day ended with Catherine and William taking one final walk through the palace gardens, this time as a family whose private struggles had become public knowledge. The weight of secrecy had been lifted, replaced by the different but more manageable challenge of living authentically while serving in public roles. The path ahead remained uncertain, but their commitment to facing it together provided the foundation for whatever challenges lay ahead. Catherine's reflection that night centered on the unexpected sense of freedom that had come with being honest about her limitations and needs. For the first time in months, she could focus on her health without the additional burden of maintaining a perfect public facade. The possibility of genuine recovery now seemed not just medically feasible but personally achievable, offering hope for a future where service and self-care could coexist. The announcement marked not just a change in Catherine's royal schedule but a potential shift in how the monarchy itself understood the balance between duty and personal well-being. The institution that had survived for centuries by adapting to changing times was once again demonstrating its capacity for evolution, this time in response to contemporary understanding of health, family, and authentic service. As Catherine prepared for sleep that first night after the announcement, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the support she had received from William, her family, the palace staff, and the British public. The journey ahead would require continued courage and adaptation, but the foundation of understanding and support that had emerged from their careful handling of the situation provided reason for optimism about the future. The woman who had entered royal life as a commoner had once again found a way to bridge the gap between ordinary human experience and extraordinary public responsibility, demonstrating that strength sometimes comes not from enduring hardship silently but from addressing challenges honestly and seeking help when needed. Her story was far from over, but this chapter had ended with dignity, grace, and hope for the future.